Today, we're going to talk about some old school stuff. When I mean old school, I mean really old school. I'm talking about the Game Boy, the original, the OG, the first handheld. I know they came out with like Tiger Electronic stuff. Those were okay. I played a couple of them and stuff, but, you know, nothing compared to a Game Boy or like a Sega Game Gear or any other kind of handheld that you can think of right now. I don't think I have any actual cartridges for the original Game Boy, but this thing still works. Actually, I got all the games for my Game Boy. I have them all on my 3DS because I was able to download them on there a while ago. And so I don't think I have any Game Boy games to show you guys. I think actually I have my old Game Boy, little Game Boy bag here. I think the only games I have are I think the only ones I have left right now are the ones for the Game Boy Advanced, which I do have still. I have my Game Boy SP, and I think I have a Game Boy Micro. Yeah. And the Game Boy Micro. Now this one, if I'm not mistaken, only plays Game Boy Advance games. The Game Boy SP, I think, could also play original Game Boy games, but it's... Yeah, I think it... Yeah, let me know in the comments below, because I can't really remember if you can play the original Game Boy cartridges on the Game Boy SP or not. But I know you can't do it on this one, on the Micro SD, because the way it's built and as small as it is, I think you can only play the Game Boy Advance games on this. And I remember, I think I was 7 years old when I got my first Game Boy. And that was like my first console, my first anything to introduce me to games. My first game was Super Mario Land. And that game was so much fun. I remember back then, for those of you who don't know, games, you didn't have DLC. So once you beat the game, you beat it. And some games like Super Mario, when you've actually beaten the game, it'll actually restart the entire game again, but the levels are harder now. You have harder bad guys. You have more, I want to say some of the levels I think the levels will stay the same, but the bad guys will be added more. So you'll have more guys to fight or more challenges to get through and stuff. In Super Mario Land, that was the first thing that I remembered was it was a lot harder when you play it the second time. If you beat it the second time, it's just going to be the same game again. It doesn't get like harder and harder and harder. I know that like some games nowadays, like I think it's like Legend of Zelda, once you've beaten the game, you can do the Master Mode is what it's called. At least I think that is for, at least for Ocarina of Time, I remember once you've beaten it, you can actually play it again. But again, it's a little harder. And I think the entire world is reversed. I can't remember if they did that for Breath of the Wild or not. Or some of the other games. But I know for at least for for the old school Super Mario games, it was always just, once you beat it, you could play it again, but it was a little bit harder. So, but yeah. I figured I'd just talk about that for a little bit, because, again, this was groundbreaking. This was revolutionary. This is what started all the stuff. I mean, man, this was so cool. And no, it doesn't have a backlight on it either. So if you want to really look at it, you got to be like, oh, I can have the light at the right angle just to play it. And if you were at night, you would have to actually have like this thing detached right here, right off of this. And you can plug in a little light adapter. I didn't have one on this one. After a while, I did get a Game Boy Color. And I think that one had a backlight. No. I don't think any of the original Game Boys actually had a backlight. Because after this, it came the Game Boy Pocket, which was just this, but slimmer. And a little bit smaller, but they made the screen bigger. But it was, it came in different colors, but it still didn't have a backlight. The Game Boy Color, no, the Game Boy Color didn't have a backlight either. I don't think it came out with a backlight until, the Game Boy SP. It actually has, let's see if I have any battery life. Oh, I do. See, that's what I mean by a backlight. If I hit this button here, the backlight goes off. And again, you have to rely on trying to play with an actual light. This, the same thing. You'd have to make sure you had the correct angle, you know, make sure it was light inside or outside or wherever you're playing. And then just turn the light on again if you wanted to play with the SP. So, yeah, little Game Boy history. I've always had a Game Boy. I've always had a handheld. I've always been that kind of a guy. I have a Switch now. That's my favorite thing. I also have an Xbox, but I think the most thing I play on is the Switch because it has, again, it's got all my games on it. Super Mario. I have the 3DS, which has like all my Game Boy games. A lot of, it actually came out with some of the 64 games too. Came out with Mario 64, but it had Wario, Yoshi, and Luigi that you could play as. And then it came out with, I think, the 3D version for Star Fox, Ocarina of Time, and Majora's Mask. So that was pretty cool because I was like, you know, 64 is my favorite game system. But the thing that started it off was the Game Boy, and I still love it. You know, I still play some of the old Game Boy games still. Again, but I'll play them on my 3DS because, well, because I don't think I have the cartridges anymore for this thing. So it's become an antique. I try to keep it in the bag so it'll stay nice and fresh. But yeah, I know most people want to play on their phone nowadays and play all these different little apps, and I'm like, yeah, whatever, that's fine. But I will still always stick with something that, you know, back in the day you had to actually plug in like a cartridge or something to play in because that's what makes it old school. So, all right, guys, have a good day.